Morning with my dad, Warren Schnitzer, Dr. Warren Schnitzer. Today is the 24th of February, 2002, and we're going to talk about my dad's experience throughout World War II. The reason why we're here is I recently had the occasion to visit the D-Day Museum in New Orleans, and while I was there, the curator of the museum asked me specifically if my pop was still alive and if I would do them the favor of gathering his memories of certain events. Not so much the history, because we can read that in a textbook, but his personal memories of certain things that I would like him to share with us so that his grandchildren and his grandchildren's grandchildren can listen to it. Dad entered World War II when he was young on June 20th, 1942. He enlisted. Apparently they gave him a hard time enlisting because he was underage, but men younger than him were being drafted, and I think he'll tell us about that. Serial number 1209-3690. Endured 5 major campaigns, including the D-Day beachhead at Normandy, Utah Beach. He spent the time 39 months in duty for his country as a member of Company C of the medical battalion that serviced the 22nd Infantry Regiment of the 4th Division. Ultimately, he was discharged honorably on September 21st, 1945, and we're going to start out by saying good morning.
Good morning.
Well,
Do you have any questions?
what is that?
Oh, this is a replica of the memorial that was dedicated in Washington, D.C. Last year in July, of the 4th Infantry Division. And the reason why I have this, there were only 90 of them made out of all of the thousands and thousands of men that were in the 4th Division. And the reason why they gave me one was because I donated in order to, I supported them for the memorial. It was an expensive thing, I suppose, and they needed donations from all of the members of the 4th Division. So I have number 21 out of 90. So I'm very pleased to have this.
What were you doing when the war broke out, and what were the events that led you to want to enlist?
I was, at the time, a student in the National College of Chiropractic in Chicago, Illinois. And when the war broke out in December of 41, I was in school, but something happened to me. I couldn't study anymore. I felt that I should be in service doing something for my country, and so I had to wait until the semester ended, and I told my parents that I wanted to enlist. The only thing is, when I went to enlist, they wouldn't take me because it's funny, they're drafting young kids at 18, but if you wanted to enlist, you couldn't because you weren't 21, you weren't old enough to sign the papers. So, of course, I had a problem convincing my parents. Eventually, they agreed with me, and they signed the papers, and I was accepted. When I went in, I think it was I took the oath in Newark Armory, and I was interrogated by, because I requested to be in the medical corps. since I had a certain amount of education in that direction. And I was interrogated by a medical doctor who thought that it was a wonderful thing that I was going to do something for my country. And since I had this education, he said to me, quote, "You're going to amount to something big in this army." And so that about 2 or 3 days later, I realized that I was shipped to Camp Croft, South Carolina, which was a basic training for the infantry. So he put me into a line company. At any rate, I don't have any regrets for that education because it came in very handy during the war to be trained as an infantryman. At the end of my basic training, I was sent down to the 4th Infantry Division in Georgia, Camp Gordon, Georgia. And I was in the infantry. But there was an accident whereby there were some injuries. We were on maneuvers and a truck turned over. It was very rainy. I forget where we were even. And some infantrymen in the truck in front of ours were injured because the truck turned over. And I ran over to to help whatever I could. And there was a man with a pretty badly broken leg. And I just proceeded to put some splints on. I got a couple of rifles and on each side of his leg, and I started to wrap it up. And some colonel saw me doing that, wanted to know how come I'm doing that. I explained everything to him. And the next thing I knew, I was being transferred into the medical corps. So that's why I wound up in the 4th Medical Battalion, where I stayed till the end of the war. Was there anything else beyond that, Robert?
It's over there.
Oh. Well, this was taken much later on. This is a picture of the men who were in that company.
Down a little bit because that's good, like that. Now let's see where you are.
I'm on your...
This way a little bit.
You want me to move it over so it'll be...
Yeah, so it's centered. And tilt it down a little bit. Tilt it...
The 5th one.
Or tilt it up. I'm getting too much light. Yeah, good, like that. Right.
The 5th one.
There he is, right there.
The bottom row.
That's it. Now hold it real still. I see your pretty face. Okay, good. Gotcha.
Okay.
What else is over here?
Well, we're not ready for that stuff. Okay. Anyway, there I was in the 4th Medical Battalion. And the 4th Medical Battalion serviced the 22nd Infantry Regiment.
What was your basic training like?
Back to Camp Croft, South Carolina. Well, we were taught everything. I was beginning to specialize in
Push-ups.
Explosives, demolition. So, but I learned to use every type of, just about every type of weapon that the infantryman had. I want to get into the 4th Medical Battalion, though. I want to get past the basic training. We were probably considered the most overtrained division. At least we felt that we were, because we were sent from one camp to another, getting specialized training, and we didn't know why until much later on. Why we needed mountain training, which we got in Elkins, West Virginia, and why we needed amphibious training, which we got in Camp Gordon Johnson in Florida, in the Panhandle. And got various training. But one little anecdote, I met a fellow called George Wright. His name was George Wright. And we became pretty good buddies because we were both from New Jersey. And everybody called us the Gold Dust Twins. At any rate, George, usually you got paid once a month, and at that time it was big money. It was, I think, $1 a day. We got a raise from $21 a month to $30 a month. And usually that night, there was a big card game or a crap game, and actually it didn't take too long when I was broke. And as a matter of fact, I was broke all month long, except for the fact that I had George, and I would borrow a $5 bill from him every evening, as long as he had his money, every payday evening. At any rate, I would have the $5 all month long, and then when payday came again, George would be waiting on the end of the line for me. I'd walk through, give him his $5. And one time he said to me, by the way, whose $5 is this? He says, I only have it for about 2 or 3 hours a month, and you have it for the whole month. So I had to straighten him out on that, because he was a little confused. But good old George. We were in Camp Gordon Johnson, and we were disgusted because we said we're being overtrained, and we wanted to get into some action. At that particular time, a contingent of officers came around asking for volunteers to go into a special unit that was being formed called the 1st Special Service Force. It was made up of Canadian and American soldiers, and they were going around into the stockades especially because this was a suicide outfit, and they were taking only screw-ups. So if a guy volunteered, of course, his sentence was commuted. So they had some pretty rough guys in the outfit. Anyway, they wanted volunteers. I said, look, I'll go. And by the way, you might as well put George Wright's name down. Poor George was out walking guard that night. He didn't know anything about it. And when he came in, I told him, he said, what the hell did you volunteer me for? I said, well, I figured we'd stick together because I wanted to go. So he said, well, all right. About 2 or 3 weeks later, they come around to collect the volunteers, and they said, all right, George, get your gear ready and let's go. So he says, well, what about my buddy here? So they said, we don't want him. As a matter of fact, the company commander said, we're not going to let him go. We need him here in this company. So there's George. The last thing I remember was that George is being dragged out, hollering like hell, saying, I never volunteered for this thing, and you're taking me. What about the guy? Well, anyway, that was the last time I saw George until I received a very nasty letter from him after he had been thrown out of an airplane over in Attu, in the Aleutian Islands, without even having had training, he told me, in parachute jumping, because they found out that the Japanese had landed there, and of course, this being a suicide outfit, they didn't care what the hell they did to you, I guess. So he told me, he said he never jumped from parachute before, and they had the static line. He said it was the most disgusting thing he had ever experienced, because especially since they went down, they didn't realize that the Japs had left. They found out that the Americans were going to come in force. So they left, and the Americans didn't know that they were gone. They were actually shooting at each other. So that was his first experience, and you can imagine the language that was in the letter thanking me for volunteering him. And the next time I heard from George, he was in Italy. Now, we were still in the States. You know, we couldn't get out of the States. They kept training us. I didn't realize that they were training us for Normandy and for the continent. But he was stuck on in Italy, the Anzio beachhead. So, well, anyway, that was George for a while. I'll mention later that I met him in Germany toward the end of the war. At any rate, Camp Gordon Johnson, where we were getting amphibious training, was a nasty place. It was all swamp, and there was one thing that always gave me the woolies, and that was the fact that when you walk through the marshes, they had these coral snakes. They look like a barber pole, you know, they're red and black and whatever. And it takes about anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds for you to die. I never came across one, and I didn't see anyone who was bitten, but I heard a lot of stories. So I was glad to get out of that place. What else is there, Robert?
Well, eventually you got on a boat and you headed out to sea. You went up to the English Channel. How was that?
Yes, it was in the winter of 1943 that we all got onto a British ship called the Cape Town Castle in New York Harbor, and it was we were part of a tremendous convoy that went across the North Atlantic to England. It was a pretty miserable trip because it was so crowded that there was no place for us to sleep. I guess we were the last ones, being medics, you know, to get on. And they didn't seem to feel that we were that important until they needed us. At any rate, there was no place to sleep, so we went down to around Z deck, and whereby the only place for us was on the steel hatch. And all we did was just find a little place for ourselves to lay down on our blanket, and that's the way we stayed. And when it came to food, it was exciting. The variety of food we had was bread, like brown bread, black bread, or whatever it was. Black tea, and it was the English food, you know. They had the tea and potatoes that were half rotten. You had to cut away the black spots in the potatoes. And right in the center of the table, I'll never forget it, was a big piece of what they called fatback. That, you know, as the ship kept rolling, this kept shimmering, and I couldn't go near that. And so I ate a lot of bread and drank a lot of tea and ate a lot of rotten potatoes. And I don't know, there was some other foods, but I can't think of what they were. At any rate, I happen to be one of these sensitive people who I get, you know, seasick easily. So after each meal, I'd make my way up to the top, and joining a lot of other fellas. We'd be throwing up overboard, and then we'd come down because we had to get back online for chow again, because it took a long time to work your way up to the kitchen. And then after you had your food, you step aside, or maybe go into where they had these benches and you could sit down. They were like picnic benches, big long wooden benches with the bench to sit on. And you'd sit there eating and looking at the fat back. And after you got finished, you'd work your way up again to the deck and you'd throw up and then you'd go back online again. And this is the way it was for about 2 weeks, I guess. We were on, a troop ship doesn't travel very fast, and a convoy will move only as fast as its slowest ship.
Were you training on the boat?
Well, there was no room to train, son. No room to train at all. It was pretty crowded place, and
did you get mail from home?
Not on the ship. No, and actually everything was secret. Everything was classified. We didn't even know where we were going ourselves. We had an idea. It was an English ship, and the war was over there, so we knew we weren't going to North Africa.
How were the women on the boats?
Women? Well, that'll give you your answer.
Did they have a problem with gays in the military back then?
I think they were all cleaned out by that time. Yeah, there were problems when I first got in. There were a couple of men who were gay. And
so you were on this boat with all of your issued equipment?
Yeah.
And you had to bring it with you in a duffel bag?
Mm-hmm.
You had your rifle, bayonet?
And by that time I was in the medics, so they didn't issue rifles and bayonets.
But everybody had live ammunition and everybody was active.
Oh,
ready
yeah,
to
oh
go.
yes, oh yes. Yeah, I got my guns later. You picked them up. Everything is available to you. And you
Where'd you get off the ship?
Oh, all right. Now, we landed in Liverpool in December. And I think we were on the ship for Christmas and New Year's. They kept us, I guess we were quarantined for about a week.
On the boat?
Yeah, on the boat, before they would take us off. I guess they were making arrangements for having us shipped down to where we were going to be permanently billeted. But we got off the ship and we were put on trains. It was naturally 3 o'clock in the morning when they did this, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, I forget. And I really forget what time it was. But anyway, all night long the train took us, and we found out the next day that we were in southern England, in Devonshire, along the Channel. In a little, we were billeted in a, well, it was a railhead called Newton Abbot. And I remember walking along with our gear in column, and the little children were coming around asking us if we had any gum or any chocolate or any foreign coins for them. And we talked, but we had to keep going along. And I was put in a little house. I guess they moved the occupants out, and I was in this little house in Newton Abbot. And it was funny, Newton Abbot being a railhead, every night the Germans would send a plane over and maybe drop a bomb or two just to keep us interested. We called him Bed Check Charlie, and come over maybe about 10 o'clock and drop a few bombs around the railroad station and then keep going. And we were in England and we had to do a lot of training. Then we were sometime in the beginning of April. We were moved out of where we were billeted, and we were sent into a tent city. We called it a tent city. And then they pulled different men out, and we had to go to a special exercise. I didn't know what the name was at the time, but we were supposed to have a drill, regular exercise, whereby we were making a beachhead. So they didn't take the whole company. They took certain ones. They took like ambulance drivers, or they took surgeons. I was considered a surgeon. I forget what the designation was. Anyway, different aid men to accompany the infantrymen. And we got on a ship, and I thought there were 6 of us, 6 big ships. But I recently saw a documentary of this particular situation. There were really 8 ships, and I didn't realize the extent of this thing. That a week or so ahead of time, they even had infantrymen storming the beach. This was known as the Tiger exercise, and it was a pretty big thing, and it was a big snafu because a lot of the men got killed in this Tiger exercise by our own people who were wanting to make it look real. So they were using live ammunition to deter the men who were making a beachhead. Thank God I wasn't part of that group. I came a week or so later with these ships, these troop ships. And what makes it so memorable is that the Germans found out that we were out in the channel, and they sent E-boats. They were like our PT boats, but they were much faster, more powerful than our PT boats. And these E-boats sank 2 of our troop ships with our men on, and it was a real fiasco. And they grazed our ship in the back. And there were quite a few of the sailors that were down below in that area that were hurt. We had to go down and take care of them.
With what? A strafing or with a torpedo?
Where a torpedo hit it. Yeah, they had torpedoed the other 2 ships. I never knew there were 8 of them. But we lost 2 of them, and our ship was hit. But we limped back in because the E-boats were chased away. The RAF sent their Spitfires out, and I had never seen anything like that. That was quite a show. They would come down strafing the hell out of the E-boats, and at one point it was quite a show. These guys were hotshot flyers because when they would come down to strafe, they would come down so low that this one plane, I'll never forget it, he come down so low, and as he pulled out, the tail hit the water, and it sprayed all around. I thought the poor guy was going to wind up in the water. But he come out of it. He was a very good pilot. You could practically see the expression on the guy's face. They were so close to us.
Could you see the E-boats?
Sure.
Did you see any get hit?
No, I didn't see any get hit.
Can you see a torpedo in the water when it's...
Well, you have one torpedo come right under the bow of our ship. Because, see, it doesn't go down deep because they're landing craft and they're supposed to go up on the beach. So they don't come back, they don't go down into the water too far. They're flat underneath. And I guess the torpedo was maybe 4 feet below the surface or something, and just went right under the front. You could almost feel the scraping of it. And
Like a big telephone pole.
yeah, looked just like a big telephone pole, Robert. We were up on deck looking down on the rail, and we were looking. It was wild. At any rate, the E-boats ran away.
And you stayed out in the water.
Well, we made our way then to the nearest port.
But you were close. You were just in the English Channel.
Yeah, we were in the channel. Yeah, we weren't that far off. You could see the land.
Golly.
So that was a little hairy. We got back and we were told, with no uncertain terms. That's why I never discussed that with you, Rob. Because I mean, I never discussed it with any of the men. The men knew little rumors about it, but we were told not to discuss it with, or otherwise we're going to be court-martialed.
Operation Tiger.
Operation Tiger. It was on Slapton Sands. Was the area we were supposed to invade, and that's where so many of our men were killed also. Anyway, we went back to Tent City, where we stayed until June. Well, actually, it was probably the end of May when they put us on the ships.
It's in here. The 377th WWII Battalion was attached to the 4th Infantry Division in March of 1944, but our first official contact with the division was during Operation Tiger. It talks about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, here they would talk about it because the war was over then, but we were not allowed to discuss it at all amongst ourselves or to anyone.
What were the events leading up to the invasion of Normandy now?
Yeah, well, see, I think it was probably the end of May when we were loaded on ships, on troop ships, and we were now in the English Channel, and it's a pretty big convoy. We didn't know what was going to happen until we got on the ship. Then, we were probably there at about a week on the ship, but during the interim, they told us what was going to happen, that we were going to be part of the invasion force, and it was going to be on June the 5th. The only thing is, the weather was so bad that they postponed it a day, and it took place on June 6th.
What did you think was going to happen?
Well, we were told that we were going to invade Normandy in France, and we were part of the invasion force. I didn't even realize at that time what part I was going to be playing. Just that we were, of course, we had been trained to get into the Higgins boats, the LCVPs, Landing Craft Vehicle Personnel, LCVP, and we trained many times as to what our activity was going to be, so we knew what we were going to face because they told us, and naturally we had to study our maps. There was a lot of preparation, and where we were supposed to rendezvous and so forth. At any rate, I remember over the loudspeaker General Eisenhower telling us that we're about to embark on a great adventure. At any rate, that morning they woke us about 3 o'clock, and we were told to get prepared, so we're waiting, and finally we got word to climb over the side. We went down on these nets that we used as a ladder, and I could look down and I saw that, boy, oh boy, that landing craft was really choppy in the water. That thing was banging the side of the ship and everything. Went down with all our gear. We loaded up.
You climbed down the cargo net.
Oh yeah, yeah. And we were all mixed in, infantry and medics and everything.
With your helmet and your gun and your backpack.
Well, we were ready to go.
In that little bouncing boat.
Yeah. And I'll never forget the feeling it was. First, we circled the ship because they kept loading men into these landing craft, you know. And then as soon as they were filled, they had to go out and go around, get out of the way, because other craft were going to load up men too. But here we were, we're biding time, you know, going around and everything, waiting for the signal to go toward the beach. But what was so impressionable were the battleships. They were they were shooting these big shells, 16-inch shells, and boy, they'd go over your head. You could almost see them, you know, because over the top, and they were smashing against the seawall.
The Atlantic Wall.
Yeah, on the big seawall that the Germans had built. It was a tremendous thing.
I saw a documentary on TV last night about the Atlantic Wall.
Yeah. This wall was maybe 15 feet high, big concrete wall, the whole extent, the whole length of the beachhead where we were anyway. I don't think Omaha Beach had a seawall, but they had a hill. They had a hell of a climb. And thank God I didn't go on to Omaha Beach. That was a bloodbath, because they ran into some Panzer divisions that were on maneuvers there. But with my beach, the Utah beach, well, anyway, it wasn't a cakewalk, but it wasn't as intense.
You know,
So,
for a moment there, when you described the battleships and the firing of the cannons, I could almost see with you, because I saw the hair on the back of your neck stand up as you were trying to recall that situation. It's probably a feeling of, look at the power of my country,
yeah.
and I'm part of this thing, and I'm off to my destiny.
Let me tell you, as the craft, as we're heading toward the shore, and it's choppy, you know, and
But you didn't go in that day. You waited. Was that
no,
June
I'm talking
6th?
about D-Day.
Okay, but didn't you do this the day before?
No,
also?
no.
Okay.
No.
You were held back.
That was all called off,
Mhm.
and we just kept sailing around out there in the channel.
Okay.
No, we didn't get
So
on
when
any.
you climbed down into your little landing boat.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
When we knew. What I'm thinking back to was when we're heading like hell toward the beach. We were told to keep our heads down, but you know me, so I'm sticking my head up. I don't know where the heck I'm going. So I could see the shells slamming against the seawall, and that it played havoc there. And thank God for that, because it was through those big holes that we were able to run. At any rate, when you think of what was going through your mind at that moment, the adrenaline was really flowing, and it was not only was it exciting, but it was frightening, because but I was so excited that the veil of fear was only faint over the top, because I knew what we were going into. But at that time, you know, you're young, and you feel as though you're immortal, that nothing is going to happen to you. You're going to make it. At any rate, we didn't go right into the beach. The son of a gun stopped, and down goes the ramp, and out we go, and I'm up to my chest in water, and we're all slopping around, and we're trying to come through, and the shells falling, and so I thought to myself, Jesus, what the hell's the matter with that guy? You know, and he couldn't wait to back out. He wanted to get away from the beach.
I want to read something to you. I've read this book too.
Yeah. Oh.
And this was cute. This was short. It says, it's called Yogi the Pilot. Did you read that one?
No.
At Mickey Mantle's funeral, Yogi Berra and other Yankee ball players were the pallbearers. Subsequently, Yogi was interviewed by a sportscaster. The conversation led to the question, were you ever in the service? Yes, Yogi replied. I was in World War II in the European campaign. Were you in the invasion? Yes and no, Yogi replied. What do you mean, yes and no? You were either in or not. Well, I piloted landing craft number 114, ferrying troops to the beaches during the invasion. I was in and out and didn't stick around to see what happened. I was only 19 then. That was the number of the landing craft that I had been on. I swore that if I ever had the opportunity to meet the pilot,
That's funny.
I would have a few words with him for landing us so short of the beach. I am still waiting to meet him.
That's funny. Yeah. You're reading from what book is that?
The War Stories book of
Oh,
4th
from
Infantry Division.
from Utah Beach to Play Cool. Yeah, it was written by Babcock. Yes, good, very good book.
Yeah. So you're on your way to the beach.
Yeah, so
All
we ran
hell's
across
breaking
the
loose.
beach.
Before you got to the beach, I guess there was a lot of activity in the water. Boats were going down.
Oh yeah,
Planes.
oh yeah. I saw, and when I looked, the boat to my right must have hit either an underwater obstacle or a shell hit it, and it went flying. You know, you could see the guys, and we kept right on going. You know, the guys are flying in the water.
Was anything hitting the boat that you were in?
I could swear maybe there was some. No, I don't
Pinging?
know.
Nothing?
Maybe machine gun fire. I forget. I don't want to say if
What were you guys talking about? Anybody talking? Do you remember anything of that boat ride?
it was very quiet. You could hear a couple of guys praying, but it was very quiet because in the boat. But there was a lot of noise outside. You know, I mean, these shells are flying over your head like crazy. You know.
Did you see them?
Oh, well, you could almost see the back of the. They're big, those big 16-inch shells, but they were coming from all the ships, and of course the first wave got in there, and we were in the second wave, and
This was Utah Beach.
Utah Beach. The shells, the guns, as the first wave was approaching the beach, the guns were elevated so that the shells went inland, you see. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been too good. So the first wave got through pretty good. The second wave, we started to get resistance because I guess they were coming out of their bunkers, you know, the Germans, and they were starting to fire on the beach. So, well, anyway, we ran across the beach. I didn't want to know from nothing. I wanted to get close to that wall so we could hunker down. And any of my men who were with me, they just followed, and I said, let's go. We ran through the big hole, and it was an incline because the road that ran parallel to the beach was higher up, about the height of the wall. So that's why they had built the wall against the incline. Yeah. So we got up there, and we crossed the road, and the first thing I did, I looked down, I saw an American laying there in the gutter, and it was like a drainage pit.
Runoff.
Yeah. And he's laying there face down, so I spoke to him. I said, hello, fella, you know, you all right? I turned him over, and his head fell back off him. It was just being held on by a little skin. So, all right, so we kept going, and the rest is very hazy. I saw, it was wild, Robert. I remember seeing the airborne. They would have these gliders. The guys were strewn around because the airborne, these plywood planes that these guys were on.
Was that close to the beach?
Right inland from the beach, because see, as you got past these roads, there were fields, open fields, and there were poles. The Germans put these poles on them, anticipating that if a plane wanted to land, it would hit a pole.
Especially at night.
Yeah, and so these gliders would come down and they'd get torn up when they hit these poles, and the guys are laying all around. And I thought to myself, that's another one I'm glad I wasn't part of, you see? And
was there anybody who volunteered for that?
I don't know. I guess they were all paratroopers, airborne and paratroopers, you know.
They were probably rangers.
Yeah, there were probably some rangers.
And their job was to get there ahead of you.
Oh yeah, they got there. They were let go maybe a couple hours before we landed.
Yeah, while they were being shelled by their own boats.
You bet.
Not a good spot.
No, not nice at all. So I remember we're hunkering behind a big tree, a log, a tree that was felled, and who the heck comes running back toward us? But Nelson Kelly. Yeah, and he comes running back. He says, "I was just shot." So I says, "Where were you shot?" He turns around, he pulls out his pants, he was shot in the rear end. You could see the bullet hole, you know, right there. It must have been a spent bullet, because it was probably stopped by maybe his pelvic area, you know. And so he says, "Look, I'm evacuating myself." I said, "Go ahead, you know, you're wounded in action." So I put a little tag on him, WWII. And we didn't see him for quite a while. But he came back later on. Anyway, there were so many stories. We worked our way to, you know, there were so many pictures whereby they, in St. Mary-Glees, that that the 1st Division broke through and relieved the 102nd Airborne. I saw one movie. Actually, that was wrong. I don't want to take anything away from the 1st Division. They were a tremendous division. But they weren't the ones who relieved St. Mary-Glees. It was the 4th Division that did it, because I was there. And it wasn't the 101st Airborne, it was the 82nd Airborne Division. So, I don't know, maybe I was wrong in my memory, but that's the way I remember it.
What did you think of your immediate superiors?
Oh, the guys were pretty good. There were some medical doctors, and there were regular 90-day wonders also, you know. They were the men who went to OCS, Officers Training. I'll never forget one time, Lieutenant Smith. This is cute. We were separated from headquarters company, and he had to get to them for, I don't know what he had to get. But anyway, we were separated, and he wanted a volunteer to drive him in a Jeep. Where we were located on the side of a hill. We had to, and in order to get to headquarters company, they had to go over this hill, down into a valley, and up over another hill. So I looked over the situation. He says, "Look, I need a volunteer. Anyone want to volunteer?" Because we looked down into the valley and we could see a few burned out vehicles that had been shelled. I guess the Germans had a spotter somewhere, an artillery observer, who would call back and tell them when to lob the shells in if they saw an American vehicle trying to get along this road. So I said, look, I'll drive you. You know, still immortal. So we get into the Jeep, and I said, hold on, here we go. He said, okay, go ahead, Schnitz. So I'm going down the hill, and all of a sudden the shells start going. So at that point I figured I'm not going to waste any time. So I put my foot all the way down to the gas tank, right down, pedal down. And what I did was I laid down so I would be less of a target in the seat, and looking like this over the top of the hood of the Jeep as my foot is pressing down on the gas. And I had to swerve around, I guess it was a weapons carrier, it was burned out. And off the road and on and back on again. So I was going pretty fast. The Jeep almost turned over a couple of times. So I finally got over the top of the other hill. And I turned around and I said, here you are, sir, I got you here safe and sound. And I looked over, there's Lieutenant Smith. He's laying on the floor of the Jeep, all curled up. He gets out. He looked a little white. He says, Schnitzer, you son of a bitch, you trying to get me killed or something? I'll never drive with you again. So that was that story.
I have a couple things that I want to go over with you. I want to go back to the beach, and then we're going to take about a 10-minute little break here.
All right.
You mentioned that you saw Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah. I was hunkered down next to the seawall before we went through, and the goddamn shells are falling. And here, all of a sudden, I hear a loudspeaker, megaphone, and there's a Jeep coming, and on the front of the Jeep it says Rough Rider, and it was Teddy Roosevelt. He had come in on the first wave with his Jeep. He was crazy, but he was terrific. I understand that they gave him a Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously, because he had a heart attack, I think, after we were on the beach for a couple of weeks. But he was wild.
He was not a young man.
No, he was no young man. He was probably in his late 50s, early 60s. But he was a brigadier general, a 1-star. And he was crazy. He's driving up and back, rallying the men, telling them, keep going. You know, they figured, geez, this guy is riding around in the Jeep, and then he's making it, so we can make it too. But he was wonderful inspiration.
All right. In reference to the actual beachhead, you weren't shooting. You didn't have a rifle.
No.
You were a medic.
No, right.
How long did it take you to get from the water to an area where you could just, like the seawall where you were protected?
Well, you see, we had to walk through the water, and then we hit the beach. The sand before the seawall was maybe 100 yards.
Did you just run it? Or
Because
did you stop?
I think it was low tide. You know, I forget. Did I run it? I ran it.
Did you look back?
I didn't look back. All I knew is I wanted to get cover.
Okay. And then once you got covered, were there people that you would look back to see?
Oh, then once I was hunkered down, I looked back.
You
Yeah.
had your favorites. I wonder if so and so made it, or were you just?
I forgot. I didn't look for that, son. I saw men laying, you know, but
Did you look out for
not
people
much.
in particular? Like, he's my buddy. I wonder if he made it, or
I
how
forget.
many
I,
bodies were coming?
I honestly forget, Robert.
All right.
I forget at the moment.
We'll take a little break.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to say about the beach?
One thing that is so outstanding, we made pretty good time. The 4th Division didn't have anything near the 1st Division had on Omaha Beachhead. By the end of the first day, I guess we were inland maybe 3 or 4 miles. But there's one thing that stands out in my mind, that is the night. That night, we were exhausted. I know I was exhausted. And I found a hole, or I dug a hole that I laid down in, and I was tired. But as I was lying there, I looked up into the sky, and I had never heard anything like this before or seen anything like it, and before or since. The Navy was still shelling, throwing shells into inland on the Normandy, and with such a concentration that it was like a rolling thunder. It was and loud, and it was like a monstrous noise that just permeated everything, and you could see in the sky the tracer bullets, because you see, we kept our planes at night. We kept our planes out of the sky, so that any planes were up there, we would shoot at them because they would naturally be the enemy. Tracer bullets all over the place, and I guess tracer bullets, I think, were every third or fourth bullet or shell would be have phosphorus in the tail of it, so that the gunner could know whether or not he was on the mark, or he could take a lead and so forth. But you could see these tracer bullets all over the place, and shells flying, anti-aircraft shells, so that you could almost feel and hear every so often where fragments would fall around you. So I remember that out of concern that it would fall on my face, I remember taking my helmet and putting it over my face, and that's the way I fell asleep. It was from exhaustion. We kept going without a stop for I don't know how many days. The 4th Division kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And of course, we were in the hedgerows at this time, and the hedgerows were all along the beach head, but mostly in the Cherbourg Peninsula. And the Norman farmers had to have some boundaries for their fields. So what they did, because they didn't have the wood to build the fences, or the rocks, I guess, or the bricks or the stone, so what they did was they would pile the dirt up in order to make a fence. And so this was all of Normandy, and Cherbourg Peninsula was made up of these fields that were fenced in by hedgerows, because the trees would grow up after a while in this dirt, and that's why it was known as the hedgerows, and which was very good hiding places for the enemy. And because you actually had to fight from hedgerow to hedgerow. I remember the one area, you see, our people would take an area, and then when nightfall come around, they would dig foxholes all around the perimeter of the hedgerows, of the field, next to the hedgerows, and they would go to sleep that way. And they would have guards to make sure that they would not be disturbed. Evidently, it was obvious that the Germans had neutralized the guards in this particular area. And I remember looking at it. We were told about it, and we ran over to see it. And it was a hideous thing, because all you could see was the butt end of the rifles sticking up out of the holes where the Germans had come along and grabbed the guys' rifles and bayoneted them with their own rifles. So you could see all these rifle butts sticking up out of the foxholes all around the field. So hedgerow fighting was pretty rough. At any rate, I think it was June 25th, Cherbourg Peninsula was secured. That's when they got the port of Cherbourg. They needed a deep water port to bring in the bigger ships so we could unload the heavier equipment. So the entire area was secured, I guess, at that time. And then we had a little rest period because we had to prepare to break out of that area because the Germans were building up troops all around to attempt to throw us back into the water. At any rate, the objective was to break through an area called St. Lo. And the 4th Division was assigned to ride on the top of the tanks of the 2nd Armored Division. And so there we were on this particular day, and we were supposed to break out of, it was in July. You know, I forget already the date in July. I think July 25th for St. Lo breakthrough. And the plan was for, we were bumper to bumper, the tanks, the troop carriers, everything. And the plan was to have a corridor whereby we could pour all our troops through. So the Air Force was supposed to come over, the fighters were supposed to come over, drop smoke bombs, and the big bombers who were way up were supposed to observe where the smoke was and drop the bombs from that point eastward into the German lines. So I remember I'm on top of the tank and, oh boy, look at the fighter planes, they're dropping the smoke bombs way, way up front. And then all of a sudden comes the bombers to drop the bombs. And it was saturation bombing, and saturation bombing is quite a unique thing. It's also known as carpet bombing, whereby the bombs are so close that each crater touches, the edge of each crater touches the other one next to it. So nothing can live through it. At any rate, they started to drop the bombs. The funny part about it is the wind was blowing in our direction. And each succeeding wave of bombers that came over were dropping the bombs closer and closer to me. And I could see up front that the men were running like hell back to get away from
the percussion of that.
It was tremendous, the percussion. You know, if you have ever experienced an explosion, a single explosion, and you could be standing there watching it, the air is pushed back against your face, you could feel it hit you. Well, when you have carpet bombing, and you're standing on top of a tank, and all of these bombs, hundreds of bombs are coming down, it's a constant slap in the face. Well, you could see what was happening. It was a tremendous sight. And I jumped off the tank and I started to run back too. But then it stopped. I guess they got word that they were bombing their own people. As a matter of fact, they hit a very important area. General Rose, I think, was one of the generals with us, and the whole area was annihilated, and he was killed with it. At any rate, they reorganized, and we were told to go forward because the hole was being punched through the German lines, and we had to go through it. And it was a nasty sight because we passed right by the area that had been bombed. So we continued, but from that point on, it seemed I was nowhere near the Falaise area. I was south of that. The Falaise area was a real tremendous deal because the Germans had poured many divisions into this area in preparation to combat the beachhead, and our artillery was planted all around it, and they just wiped them out completely. It must have been a real bloodbath there. I understand there was something close to 1 million Germans that were neutralized. At any rate, as far as the 4th Division was concerned, we didn't have much fighting. It seemed that the Germans, they just caved in, the resistance caved in, and we made our way up toward Paris very rapidly. Oh yeah, one thing that does come to my mind is, I remember one night I'm laying on the back of a trailer for a weapons carrier. I forget, there was another fellow with me. Not a big trailer, it's just a little thing. We're laying on the back of that, we're looking up into the sky, and all of a sudden I saw fire shooting out like an exhaust. And I heard the drone of a plane, but it wasn't a plane. It seemed to look like a plane because I could just see the silhouette. And it was a V-1 rocket that the Germans were shooting over toward England. And it was the way it got its power, the rocket would shoot boop, 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 boop. That's exactly what it sounded like. Spurts of energy, and as it would fire, it would propel the plane forward, and it had little wings. It was not like a regular rocket that goes into the stratosphere. This was actually like a plane, the V-1. And you could see there was one here, and then all of a sudden I saw them there. And I must have seen altogether, there must have been maybe a dozen in the sky around that time until they passed by. But that was a very eerie sight. Anyway, I guess it was around August 25th. It was always on the 25th for some reason. We were the first American troops in Paris, Robert. But we were told that we had to stop and pull back. There were contingents of the 4th Division. I didn't get into it on that day, but contingents of it. And we were told to stop and pull back because they wanted to allow General de Gaulle and General Leclerc, I guess, with the French forces to march victoriously into Paris, which they did, walk through the Arc and everything, and it was very picturesque, I guess. I saw pictures of it later.
One of the proudest days in the storied history of the 4th Infantry Division came on August 25th, 1944, when the division was the first Allied troops to enter Paris.
Yeah.
History gives credit for the liberation to the French 2nd Armored Division, but our men who were there that day know differently. Mm-hmm. The 12th Infantry Regiment led the way into Paris, followed by the rest of the 4th Infantry Division.
Yeah, and let me tell you something, Rob. It was glorious because the people, they were exhilarated. They were pulling the guys out of the cars, you know, and we couldn't go fast. We were supposed to go through in a convoy, but we were stopping, and because there were so many crowds of people, and And they're pulling the guys out of the car. They wanted to bring them home to feed them and show their appreciation and everything. I'm telling you, the division disappeared. You couldn't find anybody. And it took, some guys didn't get back for a couple of weeks to the outfit. They had to find their way back to the 4th Division. But they disappeared, and I remember who the heck was it? It was Chan Lee and myself. Some girls pulled us out, they had champagne, and we went out and we drank some champagne, we went to the park and we were talking and everything. We had such a good time. Howard Chan Lee.
Let me bring you back again.
Yes.
There's a couple interesting things here in this book. This is an excellent book about war stories. One fellow writes about raining steel, which you talked about. Somewhere in France during July, I rested against a tree and went to sleep. I was awakened by the sound of thunder and heard hailstones hitting the ground. I was about to get away from that tree so as not to get hit by lightning when I realized the thunder was artillery and the hailstones were steel. I really hugged that tree until I could recover enough to get cover.
Oh, yeah.
And then this is also on July 25th, another 25th, 1944, our 4th Infantry Division spearheaded the breakthrough at St. Lo for Patton's armor. Just 2 weeks before, we had handled the calls to try to get oxygen for Brigadier General Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who later died in the field next to where our switchboards were set up. He died of a heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
You must have read this book first. Okay, Liberation of Paris. I bet you could tell us some ooh-la-la stories.
Yeah, but not right now.
Oh, okay. You talk to me later?
Actually, to be perfectly frank with you,
You were afraid.
I went all through Europe. Even though I was a young man and not attached, I did not venture into anything because too many of the men were coming down with problems as a result. So I didn't want any part of that.
At this point, had your division taken any prisoners? What did you do with the German soldiers if you captured them?
No. The prisoners started to come later on.
Okay. Take no prisoners.
Yeah. The prisoners started to come later on. And you know what I used to enjoy? Well, I would enjoy when we had an SS prisoner. I would tell him that ich bin a Jud. I would tell him I'm Jewish. And he didn't like that. And I'd tell him that wir alles Jiden, we're all Jewish. As a matter of fact, I would tell him that this is a Jewish division. And then they'd be all upset, a whole Jewish division. And he'd say, nine. Oh, yeah. And I had the guys who were friendly with me work along with me. And I'd say, bist du Juden? Are you Jewish? And jawohl, and all these guys would say jawohl to the German. He didn't like that, And we'd make believe that we were going to do to him what they did to the Jewish people. And, well, we sort of enjoyed looking at them and seeing fear because they were very, very arrogant.
But you know what? In a different time and place, they could have been your friend.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because later on, when I went into a practice, I came across German people who were in practically the same boat as I, and we became very good. I could have been very good friends with any of them. They were only doing for their country what I was doing for mine.
So how long did you stay in Paris?
I only stayed there 2 days, and then I went back to my outfit. But I forget where the hell I even... That one night I slept somewhere. I think we slept in... Howard and I slept in the park.
Howard who?
Howard Chanley. But then I remember it was in France. Don't ask me where. one night, there were a couple of, we were in the tent, aid station there, and we were taking care of some wounded. There was not too much action at this time. And a Frenchman came in, all upset, rattling off, and of course we spoke a little French, and there was always somebody who could converse pretty good with him. The whole problem was that his wife was in labor, and she evidently was peaking, and he needed help. So the captain says, "Hey, Schnitzer, go with him." I said, "Well, please, you know." He says, no, you go with him, because I know that you told me about the time you were in college, and you went with that doctor, and there was a home delivery, and you assisted him, so you're the only one we can send." So I said, "All right, but I want to take somebody with me," so I took Carl Woods, Foxhole Woods, we called him Foxhole. He came with us, with me. And we went, and we moved out fast because the guy was in a hurry. We got there, and sure enough, she was crowning. So, incidentally, I just want to explain to you, never, when a woman is crowning, and she's spread eagle like that, and you're observing, never stand in front of that area, because it isn't the best thing for you. Because just at that point, the water broke, and it was under tremendous pressure, and need I say more?
Well,
So
it's better than a spit bath.
it was a little rough. It was a little rough. I'm glad he had rags and things there. We wiped ourselves off, and fortunately, because I had no experience, I had seen it happen once. Fortunately, the baby came out, OLA, occiput left and anterior. It was a good, normal delivery. I checked to make sure that the cord wasn't around the baby's neck. Everything was good. And the baby come out. There was nothing to do but to grab it. So, and then there was a woman there, a neighbor of his. So I handed the baby over to the woman, and she cleaned the kid up. And then we waited a little while, and and I think she started to deliver the afterbirth, and so I grabbed the hold and I handed it to the father. I said, "This is yours." So I forget what he did, but I cleaned up, and then I left. And poor Foxhole, he was in shock because he had never seen anything like that before. So he was like giddy with excitement. He wanted to tell everybody what he did. And that was a cute little story.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if you remember anything about this little town called Saintony, or the Battle of the Isthmus. Were you involved with that?
No.
You don't remember that?
No.
Was there any exposure to lethal gases?
Only one time, Robert. This was right off the Normandy. And maybe it was that night, maybe the next night. It was hot. It was terribly hot. Maybe because we were clothed and we had stuff to carry and everything. But I remember sweating like hell. And somebody hollered. See, when somebody smells anything, they're supposed to holler gas. I don't know what they smelled, but they started hollering gas, and we immediately put on our gas masks. And if you've never had to rush to put your gas mask on, sweating like anything, well, then you really haven't really lived, because this is quite an experience. And especially when you have eyeglasses on. So, however, I think at this point they had already given us prescription lenses to our gas masks, so they were individual if you needed glasses. But still, it was quite a harrowing experience, because it's a frightening feeling when they're hollering gas. Evidently, they misunderstood because there was some phosphorus shells that the Germans were laying in on us. There was a lot of smoke with it. So evidently someone felt that that was the best thing to do.
You know, you're talking so calmly about intense combat situations. You have such an objective way of talking about it. I know it's hard. Was there ever a time when you just clowned around with the guys, I guess, in the barracks with the bedding or you know, trying to get them in trouble? I know we're a little out of sequence here, but once
back in basic training.
It was all back in basic training.
Yeah.
I remember you told me little stories.
Yeah, well, what happened would be the short sheet. You know, if a guy come in late at night, they knew he was out, whatever, getting drunk, having a tattoo or something. They'd short sheet him, and when you short sheet a guy, see, there were 2 sheets in the barracks. You had to fix your cot a certain way. 2 sheets. The first sheet was laying down. The second sheet, the top sheet, what they would do is take that sheet and make it look like the first sheet. They would put it under your pillow, you know, fix it nice. And as you would bring the sheet down, they would take it and bring it back again. And bring it under the blanket so it would look like the top sheet. So that when you got into it, you could only get halfway down. So we'd go to sleep. The guys would be in at a certain time because you had to be in at the bed call, you know. So they'd come in before a certain hour, I guess. But the lights were already out, and everybody'd be waiting to see what the hell happened. And you hear the guy getting undressed, and then trying to get into the... See, because what you try to do is not disturb your bed. Because in the morning, when you had to get up, and your bed had to be in perfect condition when you went out for roll call or whatever it was, because there'd be inspection after that. So you didn't disturb your bed. You had it made, and you would wiggle down in between the sheets and try to sleep like that without moving, so that when you got up in the morning, all you did was just wiggle out of it and then just straighten it a little bit, and it was made so you'd be able to be in good shape for inspection. Well, everybody's waiting, and this one guy especially, who was a real screw-up, we fixed him good. And what we did was we short-sheeted. So he's trying to get into his... And you'd hear this struggling and cursing and everything else. I think he shoved his feet right through the sheet so he wouldn't disturb anything. But he was cranky as hell. He was awful angry, you know. So that's short sheet. And I always would check mine. After that, I always checked my bed to make sure that it wasn't short sheeted. And then another time, I remember they nailed this guy's shoes to the floor.
Both of them?
Yeah, both of them. And you know what you'd do is you'd come out of bed, jump into your shoes, you know, tie them up, then take off.
But what does a CO do when he walks in and he says, "Everybody attention for inspection," and he sees a guy get up and put his shoes on and then fall over?
Laugh.
He laughs?
Yeah, laugh. He knew what was happening. The guy had no choice, you know. Then the sergeant would come in and start reaming everybody out good, you know.
Yeah.
If I ever find out who did this, you know, blah, 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 you'll be on KP for the rest of your life. Which I spent a little time myself on KP, you know.
Dad, you brought back some nice souvenirs. Did you get them yet at this point? You're still not in a position to bring home a souvenir.
Yeah, what kind of souvenirs?
Oh, well, you brought me a Luger, you brought me a German helmet.
Oh yeah, I brought a lot of stuff. I
ceremonial
brought my
knives.
mess kit back, and you have a ceremonial dagger from the Germans. What was that? Deutschland or
Alles für Deutschland.
Uh-huh.
Alles für Deutschland.
Alles for Deutschland?
Alles für Deutschland.
I don't know. It was a ceremonial dagger, a very nice looking thing, and I brought home bayonets, a German bayonet, and I brought home a Luger
A wooden bullet.
and a wooden bullet. Yeah, you know,
I saw some of them at a gun show.
did you see the wooden bullets? There was a point in time where the Germans were running out of lead. And they figured, look, what difference does it make what we use as long as it creates casualty? So they had wood instead of lead.
What was the effective range on that?
Gee, Robert,
Couldn't have been that far.
it couldn't have been that far. Because did you notice it was also split? They split the front of it a little bit. So it would be like a dum-dum when it hit. It would splinter. So they used wooden bullets.
Well, take me to the Siegfried line.
All right. There was something else, I forget what it was. Okay, the Siegfried line. Well, they were the dragon's teeth and pillboxes and everything. And as I mentioned before, the 4th Division was we were always at the point. Anytime there was a sloppy job to do, they put the 4th Division there. At least it felt like that. I guess every division felt it, so they were getting it. I know the 1st Division, the 28th, the 9th, the 29th. These were all crack divisions. They were excellent, and they lost a tremendous amount of men. I guess no matter where you went, it was a lousy job. The Rangers, the paratroopers, the 101st, the 82nd Airborne were wonderful men. We lost an awful lot. The Siegfried line, yes. Well, we had to pull back. And one area that stands out in my mind is the Hürtgen Forest. It was known as the Death Factory. And everything there, the Germans had us zeroed in, and it was pristine forest before the Americans moved in. The Germans sucked them right in. The 28th Division was there first, I think, and they were practically annihilated. They pulled them out, they pushed us in. It was a real meat grinder. The only way you could exist in there, the shells, the tree bursts and the air bursts were terrible. We lost over 50% of our division before they pulled us out. I got a little piece of mortar shell, I guess it was, in my thigh. And
It was cold.
it was cold and rainy. It was miserable. The worst weather you can possibly think about, and it was constantly drizzling and muddy. Mud is muddy as hell. And what you would do is you lay in your hole with the water. You'd pull a couple of logs over the top of you, because in the morning the logs would be chopped up from the shrapnel. It was very bad, Robert.
How many days did you spend there?
Couple of weeks, I think. They had to pull us out. I really forget.
Did you
But-
get any rest?
As much as you could get. It was a nightmare, Robert. Then they pulled us out, and they let's see, we went up to Aachen. Yeah, Aachen was in the north, further north. We took Aachen, and then they decided to put us into a rest area. So, because they figured we needed rest. So where did they put us? They put us down just east of Luxembourg, and they called a rest area, you know, where every once in a while artillery shells would come flying in, just to make sure you don't lose interest, I guess. And they called that incoming mail as compared to outgoing mail. That was an expression that was used. So, but there we were in this beautiful area and just east of Luxembourg, and it was That was in the beginning of December. And we were there about a week. And on December the 16th, all hell broke loose. This was the Battle of the Bulge, known as the Ardennes campaign. The Germans they had to get Luxembourg because it was a crossroad. There were a lot of roads that went into Luxembourg, and they needed that area. They didn't get it. The 4th Division was there, and they pushed them to the north. So they broke through north of us. And I think at that time, the 106th Division, it was a new division, just newly equipped and sent in. They were captured. I think the entire division, or most of it, were captured. And who was in it? It was my old buddy Dave Eisman. We graduated college together. Dave told me that he was a prisoner, and he was a member of the 106th. He said he didn't even take the cosmoline out of his rifle. That's a lubricant. Keep it from rusting. And they were captured because the Germans broke through, and it was a pretty lightning force they had. And actually, the record will show that there were more American casualties during that campaign, the Battle of the Bulge, than any other campaign in the history of American warfare, including the Gettysburg Battle, where you had Americans on both sides. So we had a lot of casualties in the Battle of the Bulge.
Did you get a chance to bathe?
Bathe?
How did you take care of your personal hygiene?
Well, actually, every time when it was a rest area, and they would bring in the tanker truck and things like that, and they would issue you clean clothes, and you'd throw the garbage off. You know, I never had socks because all I saw was the top of the sock. The bottom was always rotted out. And so they'd give you new shoes, and your feet were swollen, and, you know, but you lived through it. But in another time, as far as bathing was concerned, because it was pretty rough. So I remember...
It had to have been covered with blood, covered with mud.
Well, I was covered with blood
with
a lot.
excrement.
Yeah. Well, what happened was this. We had to wash. So it's some kind of a siren or something. I remember a few of us, we would take a bucket, the only way, water, we put it in our helmet. We'd lay the helmet down, disrobe, and wash ourselves any way we could. So we're washing ourselves, we're standing there buck naked, and all of a sudden we look over and there's a bunch of French girls laughing like hell at us, you know. So some of the guys made different gestures and things, you know. And the girls had laughed, they didn't care.
Did they have red legs too?
Oh no, the red legs? The red legs were the ones, no. And you know, it's funny you should say that. I guess you remember what I mentioned to you about. When we landed in Liverpool, and I remember we're standing at the rail of the ship, because we were in quarantine for about a week, I think, before they let us off. We're looking at the people walking by, and we'd look at the girls and wave, you know, and we noticed that the girls all had, their legs were red, and I couldn't understand it. I found out later on that their explanation was that the reason why their legs were red is because they had bare legs and they're sitting in front of the fireplaces so much that it seemed to have done something to their legs, and their legs were red. And I don't know what the mechanics or the chemical problem was, but their legs looked red to us. So that was the only explanation that I got, that it came because they sat in front of the fireplaces all the time. That was their method of heating. Well, that was Hurricane Forest. There was
Battle of the Bulge.
Battle of the Bulge.
On your way to Luxembourg.
Yeah, you know, I didn't get up to Malmedy. We didn't go that far north into Belgium. But that was a terrible thing the Germans did. They massacred an awful lot of our men. They didn't take prisoners. And they left them there to freeze and die and be covered with snow and everything. After that, a lot of our men didn't want to take prisoners either. And we eventually worked our way into Dachau, into Germany. And this was a little nasty. We were the first American troops. We liberated Dachau. And when the men went in, they didn't take prisoners. They lined up the guards and they shot them. And we turned some of the guards over to the inmates who were strong enough to kick the hell out of them. And we saw to it that the Germans did not respond. Let the inmates do anything they wanted to them. And some of them took pretty good revenge on them. The inmates, there were so many bodies, there were piles of bodies around. And it was it was shocking. You could see where one fellow I was talking to, they had ripped his right arm off at the elbow, and I don't know, but the bone was still sticking out a little bit, and they had wrapped something around it, I don't know, but he showed me, and it had healed like that with the bone sticking out, and I'm surprised it wasn't infected or anything. And he was telling me that he was hungry. So I said, see, there was a little town around it, around Dachau. So walked into the bakery. I had him and a couple of his friends come with me. Walked into the bakery. There were some people there. I pulled out my gun. And I said, Raus! And they ran out. I pointed it at the baker, the guy behind the counter, and I said, geben mir alles Bröten. And he looked at me, I said, alles Bröten. He come out with a load of bread, and I gave it to the people. So, that one. I remember another time, I had a buddy of mine, couldn't speak any German, and he was a stamp collector. We were in this little town, and he said, look, he says, I want to, Hitler stamps. They had all these stamps. And so we went into the post office. Did the same thing. I said, gave me alle Stampfmachen. So he said, alle Stampfmachen? Nein. So I pulled out the gun. I said, gave me alles. He said, jawohl.
You have to tell them the rules.
Oh, yeah, well, you have to explain the rules to him, yeah. So, he runs in the back, he comes out with a load of stamps, and he kept bringing it out. And here, I forget his name. He was from the state of Washington, a nice guy. He had emptied out his duffel bag. He threw all the stuff away and everything, because it was toward the end of the war. A lot of the stuff he unloaded, and he had an empty duffel bag, which he loaded up with all these stamps. They were all different denominations, and at that time there were airmail stamps, and there were Hitler's pictures on them they must have been a small fortune. He could hardly pick it up. I had to help him back to the bivouac area where we were, and we were carrying this big load of stamps with him. And the last time I saw him, I remember we were getting back on the ship. We were getting on the ship in Le Havre, I think, to come back to the States because the war was over in Europe, and we were told that we were going to go back to the States and be re-outfitted for the Pacific. So, so there he is, He's dragging, because nobody would help him. They had their own crap to carry. He's dragging his duffel bag up the gangplank. And that was the last time I saw him. I don't know where he slept or what area he went into. But everything was sort of informal at that point because the war was over and we did whatever we wanted to, on ship, and we just couldn't wait to get back. And I don't know what the heck happened with him, but
Let's go back to the concentration camps, because there are people that still say that it never happened. I don't know. There are people that have rejected, and I've heard them talk that it's just a lie, that the Americans made it up and so
Yeah.
forth. But certainly it did happen.
let me tell you, Robert.
You told me that you
After
saw a
we
train car.
Yeah, after a day or so, the inmates were telling us that on the siding there were some boxcars. There were three boxcars that were laying there that had come in a few months before, and they never got around to opening them up. And there were probably people in there. So we broke the locks, we opened the doors, and it was a shock because it was jammed. The boxcar that I looked at anyway was just jammed only with women and their babies. And it was so crowded, so jammed, that they were stuck standing up. They probably just packed them all in and they couldn't move, they couldn't even breathe, and then they closed the doors.
They were dead for 3 days or more than 3 days?
Dead for 3 months. They was laying there for 3 months. They were holding their babies above their heads so they wouldn't be crushed. And that's the way everybody was. Rotten, stinking, with maggots and everything. And that's the way it was. It was
What do you do
very,
with a car like that? What do you do with that car?
I don't know.
Do they burn it?
I have no idea what they did. We had to move out. That was the job of somebody else, who I wouldn't envy.
Tell me how you came by that nice Luger that you brought home, that P08 9mm.
I'm not going to tell you how I could buy it, but I got it from an SS officer. I got it from him.
He gave it to you?
Not voluntarily.
Oh.
No.
Where was that, at the Bulge? You were watching a tank battle. You were up on a hill.
Well, that was a different time.
Okay.
The tank battle. Yeah, I had my 45 in my hand. Yeah, I shot that guy. Yeah, maybe. No, that isn't where I got I got it another time. The Luger. But the guy was dead. So I took the Luger, and I got a beautiful Mauser. I had a beautiful Mauser until someone broke into the house.
That was my Mauser.
Yeah, I gave you the Luger, Rob.
Well, yeah. I remember shooting that. That was a beautiful 32 Mauser. Nice little gun. With a little SS, little swastika on the bottom of it.
Yeah, it was engraved. Yeah. Yeah, that was a pearl black.
Pearl handle.
Pearl handle, black pearl. It was a beauty.
In the case.
Yeah, it had a nice holster with it. Yeah.
Why'd you
I
lose
got that
one?
from an officer also.
He gave it to you?
No.
All right. Okay, we're through now the Battle of the Bulge, and that was December, so you must have spent your birthday over there.
Yeah, don't make me get emotional. One time we were in a tent. We had taken care of all the wounded, and I'm sitting there on this litter where I was going to sleep for the night. At least I had cover that night in the tent. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, and all there was, here's this tent with all these wounded guys laying around there, and some of them moaning, so most of them sleeping. And there was a priest who was blessing different men, last rites where it was necessary. And I'm thinking, and there's a little Coleman lantern hanging in the center pole, the main pole that's holding up the tent. It's dark, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell day is today? I thought, holy Jesus, this is November 25th. This is my birthday. So I mentioned it to the to the priest. I said, gee, you know, this is my birthday. He didn't say a word to me. He walked away, and he come back, and when he come back, he had a little can of cashew nuts. Boy, I'm telling you, I thought, cashew nuts. And here's a priest, he knows I'm Jewish, and he brought me something he had in his pack. I guess he got a package from home. He gave it to me, and I opened it up, and I shared it with whoever was awake, and it was very touching. Usually when I talk about this, I break, but I guess I've become desensitized.
Yeah.
And but that I can't forget that.
Let's take a little break.
Okay. When we came back to the States, we landed in Norfolk, Virginia, and we went into a camp down there, and we were all given a 30-day furlough, and we're told that we were told that when we come back, we're going to be re-outfitted to go over to Japan.
They sent you home from Germany at what point?
No. We left at Le Havre, I told you before, and we went on the ship. We come back to the States. We landed in Virginia.
Okay.
And we were sent to this camp. And then we were all given a 30-day furlough. As I told you. So during this time on furlough, incidentally, Robert, I met your mother when we were in Elkins, West Virginia on mountain maneuvers. I had a 3-day pass, and I went over to Hagerstown, Maryland, where she lived. And I visited a USO where she was with all her girlfriends, trying to do her part, you know, dancing with any of the soldiers who were at the nearby camp. And I met your mother there. At any rate, as a result of meeting her, we started to write to each other, correspondence. And we wrote all the way through the war. And by the time the war was over, we knew we were going to get married. And by the time I come back from overseas, I mean. So actually, I had seen her only 2 or 3 times before I went overseas. And we knew we were going to be married. So one objective that I had was to go to her and give her an engagement ring, because all my monthly checks were being sent home, and my parents would bank it for me. So I had a few bucks saved, and I went and I bought her an engagement ring, and I was going to surprise her, and I visited with her. At that particular time, she was studying to be a nurse, a cadet nurse, to go into the service, because she wanted to do her part too. So she was in Elkins, West Virginia, at a hospital where she was in training, and I went to visit her there, and that's when I gave her her ring, and we had an engagement picture made, and I thought you'd like to see it.
Tilt it down just a little bit. Tilt it so I get the reflection off of it. Oh, you are tilting. That's pretty good.
So you see, Diane has her cadet uniform on, and I was still in uniform because the war wasn't over. And this picture actually was taken in Hagerstown, Maryland, where she was able to, I drove her down back home. She was on a little vacation, I think, for a week. Okay? So
ultimately,
while I was
I had an honorable discharge.
Well, while I was on vacation, they dropped the bomb. and I'm pretty sure it was on August the 8th. My memory serves me, and of course that the honeymoon was over then. The war was over, and so I was discharged very rapidly because I had had quite a few points. They discharge you according to the point system, and I had had so many that they discharged. The war was over in August. I was discharged in September. I went back to college because of the hiatus due to the war, and I graduated as a chiropractor, and that was my life's work. Now, not too long ago, I received a communique from Senator Torricelli to come out to Newark. It was a few years ago. Come out to Newark that they were going to give me certain medals that I knew I was entitled to medals, but I didn't know which ones or how many. And he presented me with...
Were people receiving medals all the way through the war?
Yes.
Did they wear them, or what did they do?
No, you don't wear them. You send them home, or you put them in your bag. But one of my medals I got at one time during the war period. But this, they gave me.
That's good, like that.
Presented me with these medals, and then I figured I would have them framed so my children and grandchildren could have them.
Can you tell us what you got there?
Well, it takes a little while, but let me just tell you about a few of them. This, of course, is the insignia for the 4th Infantry Division. That was my rank. This is a dog tag.
Move your hand, let me read that plaque. Warren H. Schnitzer, serial number 12093690, 4th Infantry Division, 4th Medical Battalion, June 21st, 1942 through September 20th, 1945. Very nice.
Okay, now...
Sergeant.
Yeah.
Ivy.
Mm-hmm. This is a combat medic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a button that you put on your lapel, the service, to show that you were in the service. Now, at the top here, we have a Purple Heart, and we have 2 bronze stars for valor. You notice the oak leaf cluster there, and the V.
What does that mean?
For valor. It wasn't for meritorious. And I believe this one here is for making the beachhead in Normandy on D-Day. This one here is the Army of Occupation. You see the
June 6th.
German, yeah. And
Army of Occupation.
yeah. And this is a World War II commemorative medal. This one here I like. This is the
European, African, Middle Eastern campaign.
yeah, that's it. You notice the little arrowhead on here? That was for the Normandy D-Day.
And it also has a star.
That's a Silver Star. The Silver Star, you see, for every campaign you're in, you earn a Bronze Star. But after a while it would get awful crowded there, so for every 5 campaigns, they give you 1 silver one. So that represents 5 Bronze Stars.
Mm-hmm.
This is a presidential unit citation for the 4th Infantry Division.
What is it?
With an oak leaf cluster for extraordinary service.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 of them. 2 times the president named the 4th Division.
Okay, and then what's this one on the left?
This,
Yeah. Let me see if I can read it for you. This says...
oh, that's a good conduct.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, I never spent any time in the stockade.
Oh, okay. And the other one is American Campaign.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I have some others here.
Come on, let's see them.
Okay. The state of, about 2 years ago, I was called. They had a big celebration at Fort Monmouth where a lot of the men who were in the invasion of Normandy were presented by the French government with a medallion. This is very nice. So I had that
Yeah, hold it the way you held it before. Tilt it
this way.
the other way.
The other.
Yes. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, that's good. Okay, this one is from the French for your time in Timbuktu. Liberation of France, 1944.
Mm-hmm.
Normandy province. All right.
And then the state of New Jersey
What's this one here?
contacted me, and they wanted to present to me
Distinguished
this
service.
Distinguished Service Medal
Mhm.
with an oak leaf cluster. I guess they figured that they wanted to give me 2 of them. So,
Is that what the oak leaf cluster means?
yeah, the oak leaf cluster means a second one.
Gotcha.
So
What else you got back there?
well, that's just the citation. You want me to hold that up?
It says the state of New Jersey Distinguished Service Medal awarded to Technician 4th grade Uncle Werner, the acting governor. Okay. Good.
Can you read it?
Yeah, I can read it.
That's it? Enough?
Well, we can read it again.
No.
Didn't read the whole thing. Yeah, under a third awards a Distinguished Service Medal to Technician 4th grade Warrant for distinguished meritorious service in ground combat during World War II in the European, African, Middle Eastern theater of operation. Okay. We've got about 3 minutes left on our tape.
Oh. I'm very pleased that I came through everything because I'm happily married for over 56 years, and my wife gave me 3 beautiful children.
I would have been up the creek if you didn't make it.
No, that's true, you would have had a problem. And I have 3 beautiful children, and I'm very happy with them, and I'm very proud of them all. And I guess I'm finished. All right, son?
Well, I don't know. You got about another 60 seconds you have to eat up. Well, thanks, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can pass this down from generation to generation, I think it would be a wonderful keepsake.
Well, I'm glad I could do this for you, son.
Proud of you, kid. Love you.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.